Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. When people hear the term FIRE, financial independence, retire early, they tend to picture someone who may be in their 30s, retires, and never works again, and maybe lives off ramen noodles for the rest of their life.
Only eating instant noodles for a full day.
And sure, that can be a version, but over time, the concept has evolved really into 6 primary styles, each with its own lifestyle, savings rate, and different withdrawal strategies. And today, I'm going to walk through every single one of these with clear examples and how much each might take to reach and which one might fit your life best. I also want to talk about how Social Security plays into each of these FIRE types because it's going to be a big factor depending on how long you work and when you retire. And at the end, I want to compare it to a more traditional retirement approach and see where these different approaches overlap and truly where they don't. Let's start with the most minimalist path and the one that really kicked off the entire FIRE movement. Lean FIRE. Lean FIRE is all about retiring on a modest budget and doing it fast. This is really for people who are in their 20s or 30s and truly comfortable with frugality. It's about living on an income of, say, $25,000 to $40,000 a year, which very well could mean sharing expenses, living in a low cost of living area, or maybe moving abroad so your budget can stretch further. To support this type of lifestyle, you might need a portfolio of anywhere from say $600,000 all the way up to $1 million. And you could reach that in potentially, say, 10 to 20 years, depending on how low you keep your costs and how high you keep your savings rate. For example, let's say we have a 30-year-old software tester who makes $55,000 a year, but finds a way to save 50% of her income because she lives with roommates. She hits Lean FIRE by, say, the age of 42, moves to Portugal, and then lives comfortably on perhaps $2,500 a month. Now, a lot of the times when we talk about withdrawal rates in retirement, we hear a lot about the 4% rule, but when it comes to those who are using the Lean FIRE approach, we tend to see a more conservative withdrawal strategy, somewhere in the ballpark of, say, 3 to 3.5%. And this is simply because they want to protect against market downturns and unexpected expenses, and they're planning on a very long retirement horizon. Now, as far as which account types would be best if you're prepping for this type of retirement, well, I would absolutely say a traditional taxable brokerage account simply because there's no limit on the amount that you can put into it and there's no restrictions on when you can access this money or how you can take it out. I also think there's still a great benefit to using a Roth IRA just because this account does come with a lot of flexibility and allows that tax-free growth, and you can always access the money you've put in at any time completely tax-free, penalty-free. And if you happen to work for an employer who offers an HSA during your working years, again, this can be a great account to use simply because it allows you to set money aside tax-free, allows it to grow tax-free, and you can withdraw it tax-free so long as you use it for qualified medical expenses. And that is a great asset to have in your corner. And because with the Lean FIRE approach, you're retiring so early, you're likely retiring long before you're eligible for Social Security. And you've likely only contributed modest amounts over the years. So when it comes time to claim your benefit, you're likely going to receive a greatly reduced benefit or something close to the minimum. So for this reason, a lot of people who follow the Lean FIRE approach just look at Social Security as a bonus and don't truly rely on it as an income source. And if you do decide to live abroad, great news, for the vast majority of countries, you can still receive your Social Security benefits as long as you're eligible. There's only a very limited number of countries that fall into the exceptions category, and with this flexibility for those who are interested in the Lean FIRE lifestyle, for those internationally inclined retirees, it's a very attractive approach. Fat FIRE is essentially the luxury version of financial independence. You want the freedom to walk away from your job, but you also want comfort and flexibility and perhaps a Tesla or two. This path is really ideal for high income earners who are, say, in their 30s all the way up to their 50s who want to retire without cutting their lifestyle. Maybe they want to live in a high cost of living area. Maybe they still want to travel and eat out as often as they want or keep as many premium subscriptions as they want without any guilt. To support this, you're generally looking at annual spending of, say, $150,000 a year or more in retirement, which means you would need a portfolio of, say, 2.5 to 4 or even $5 million to sustain this lifestyle over time. And it might take you anywhere from 15 to 25 years to reach this as a high income earner, depending on how aggressively you save and invest. For example, let's say we have a dual income couple in New York and they make $400,000 a year. They each max out their 401ks and invest in taxable accounts. They retire at the age of 52 with $3.5 million invested and travel 6 months out of the year, keeping a condo in the city and perhaps a second home in Colorado. Now, when it comes to withdrawal strategies in retirement, those who are following the FIRE approach tend to be a little bit more conservative. Maybe they use something in the ballpark of 3% because, again, we're trying to sustain an elevated lifestyle for a longer period of time. And for that, you want to build in a conservative buffer. They may rely on dividend income, they may have real estate cash flows, maybe they even use partial annuities to create some guaranteed income streams and protect against sequence of returns risk. When preparing for this type of FIRE, some of the best accounts you can use are traditional 401ks. This gives you tax-free growth and maybe helps to reduce your tax burden during your working years if your retirement income is lesser than during your working years. A Roth account, again, is a great option because that gives you tax-free withdrawals later in life. Again, I do want to emphasize using a traditional brokerage because if you're retiring earlier than a traditional retirement age, you want to have funds that you can access at absolutely any time. And again, an HSA for medical expenses, a wonderful account, a triple tax advantage. The money gets to go in pre-tax, it gets to grow tax-free, and gets to come out completely tax-free. And if you have any real estate properties, this again adds more diversity to your portfolio and allows you to be more creative with your drawdown strategies so you're not always withdrawing from your portfolio. And the more creative you can be with your withdrawal strategies, the better buffer you can have against very large tax bills. With higher lifetime earnings, FIRE folks often qualify for near max Social Security benefits, but most do treat it as a bonus, not a core piece of their plan. When it does kick in, it can help reduce portfolio withdrawals or simply fund additional travel. Theoretically, the higher your income, the easier it should be to achieve FIRE, simply because you can save and invest more. But in reality, that's not always the case. Higher income earners tend to live in higher cost of living areas, which increases your expenses. And often, if you're a high income earner, your friends tend to be high income earners and they tend to spend more freely. So it can become so easy as your income increases to simply spend more because of where you live and who you surround yourself with. This is called lifestyle inflation, and this can quietly eat away at your savings rate. So if you are a high income earner, FIRE can absolutely be possible, but only if you stay intentional with how you live and how you save and how you invest. Barista FIRE is where your investments cover part of your lifestyle and you work in a low stress part-time job to fill the rest. This is ideal for people who don't want to grind until they hit full FIRE, but they also don't want to retire just yet. It's ideal for people, say, in their 30s to their 50s who have a modest income and are looking for more work-life balance. In this case, your annual spending might be anywhere from $40,000 to, say, $75,000 a year. And when you go into Barista FIRE, your portfolio might be covering half of your expenses, with the other portion of your expenses being covered by your part-time work. So to have a portfolio that would sustain this, you might need anywhere from $500,000 to $1.5 million invested. And if you approach this diligently, it might take anywhere from 10 to 20 years to achieve. For instance, let's say we have a 45-year-old graphic designer who decides to leave her 9-to-5 job but keeps 3 freelance clients. Her portfolio covers her basic needs, and then she works 15 to 20 hours per week to cover extras and healthcare. When you start withdrawing from your portfolio, your withdrawal rate is actually quite low, maybe in the ballpark of 2%, because again, you're still working and earning an income, and your portfolio is only supporting part of your retirement. Once you fully step into retirement, which could be several decades down the road, or maybe you continue this for a lifetime, if you do fully step into retirement, then that withdrawal rate tends to get pushed up and it goes to maybe 4 or 5%. Now, the ideal accounts for this approach to FIRE, topping the list again is going to be a traditional taxable brokerage account. There's no limitations on when you can access this money, and it gives you unlimited flexibility. I'm still going to sing the praises of, say, a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k, giving you that tax-free growth, and later you can withdraw from this account completely tax-free. And if you did work for an employer who has an HSA and you took advantage of it, that is a golden account to have pretty much any day of the week. Now, this is really one of the few FIRE approaches where Social Security can play a major role later on in your traditional retirement years. Because let's say you worked full-time and then eventually mid-career stepped down to part-time work. If you continue working part-time through your 50s and your 60s, you're continuing to build up your Social Security benefits. So once you decide to claim, that benefit can be a meaningful portion of your retirement income. Coast FIRE is for people who want to save hard early and then let time and compound interest do the rest. This is a unique FIRE approach in the fact that you continue to work a full career and retire around traditional retirement age. Once you hit your Coast FIRE number, which might be $200,000 or $300,000 invested, and you try to hit this number as early as possible, maybe as soon as your late 20s or your early 30s, you technically no longer need to invest for your future. And the idea is that compound interest alone could grow your portfolio to your desired target nest egg by the time you reach full retirement age. But here's the reality. Most people who start out as disciplined savers tend to keep saving. They may not save as intensely as they did in those early years, but they usually continue contributing just at a more balanced and sustainable pace. So while you could entirely stop contributing to investments with this approach, most people who follow the Coast FIRE approach tend to save aggressively early on in their career, and then they taper off or reduce their savings rate over time as they allocate more money to other priorities that have come up in life. For example, let's say we have a teacher who's able to save $250,000 by the young age of 32. She still continues working full time, but instead of pushing to the max on every single account after the age of 32, she sort of lets that money ride and has a lesser savings rate. By the age of 60, her accounts would be projected to grow to over 1.5 million without any further contributions. Now, with this approach, there really is no withdrawal strategy that's happening early because, again, someone who's following the Coast FIRE approach is continuing to work a traditional career and retire around a traditional age. So once they do step into retirement, they might use something like 4% as a withdrawal rate, maybe a 5% withdrawal rate, or some other dynamic withdrawal strategy. The ideal accounts for the Coast FIRE lifestyle are really those traditional retirement accounts and Roth accounts, simply because we're looking at a more traditional retirement age. So it's very likely that once you do step away from the workforce, you're going to be able to access this money without any penalties because you'll be at those traditional retirement ages. Now, I do still want to mention, if you want to step away from the workforce a little bit earlier, maybe you do want to put something aside into the taxable brokerage account because of its flexibility, but whenever possible, take advantage of tax-advantaged accounts, whether they're traditional, whether they're Roth, simply because they allow your money to grow as much as possible. But really in this situation, the taxable brokerage account isn't as important because, again, we're just getting to that more traditional retirement age. Now, some people assume Coast FIRE results in a lower Social Security benefit. But that's not necessarily true. Most Coast FIRE folks still work full careers. They just don't save at the same intensity level after their early wins. You're still earning an income, and that absolutely counts towards your benefits calculation as far as Social Security is concerned. You've saved aggressively early on, and then you've tapered off your savings rate, but you still have strong earnings throughout your entire career. So Social Security will still be a meaningful portion once you reach retirement age. Now, personally, this is my favorite type of FIRE approach because I think it's so much easier to make sacrifices early on in your career before you have a mortgage and before you have a family. Also, I have a pretty big what if mindset. What if I'm forced to take time away from work later in life? What if a health issue comes up and changes everything? For me, it's not just theoretical. I had a brain tumor early on in my working career, and it took me an entire year to recover. So it shaped the way how I look at financial independence and made me value financial security much more highly, knowing that life can change on a dime. And that way I know I have a cushion no matter what happens. independence. Coast FIRE is a way to buy yourself freedom and resilience, not just in retirement, but across your entire career. A slow FIRE is a lot like traditional retirement planning, but with more intention, more strategy, and often more freedom. Instead of retiring super early, your goal is to hit financial independence by late 50s or early 60s and enjoy life along the way, not just in retirement. This is a great path for people who are, say, in their 30s to their 50s and earning anywhere from, say, $60,000 a year all the way up to $150,000 a year, targeting saving maybe 20 to 35% of their income and trying to hit a net worth of, say, 1.5 to 2.5 million. In this case, we might have a couple in their 40s who's saving 25% of their income. They still take vacations, they live in a home they love, they enjoy their life now, but they're on track to retire by 58 with $2 million and no mortgage. The withdrawal strategy for this group who's pursuing slow FIRE would look a lot like that traditional 4% withdrawal or 5% withdrawal, or maybe a guardrail approach where you adjust your withdrawals up or down based on your portfolio performance. The whole point is to have more flexibility without sacrificing your stability. For this type of retirement, you can use a whole host of account types. You can use traditional 401ks and IRAs, or Roth 401ks and IRAs, or a mixture of the two. If you have an HSA available, again, these are wonderful options because of the triple tax advantage treatment. I do still think a brokerage account can play a part in this portfolio because, again, if you do step away from the workforce in your early 50s or your mid 50s, you do want to be able to draw from your account without any restrictions. Now, the rule of 55 could play into your account if your employer does abide by that rule with their employer-sponsored plan. Depends on your plan type. I have a whole video on the rule of 55. If that's something you're interested in checking out, I will link it down below. But make sure that you know if you pursue this type of retirement, you have a whole slew of accounts that you can utilize. And as far as Social Security is considered, for this group of individuals, because they're working well into their 50s or perhaps even into their 60s, they're building a really strong earnings history. So Social Security is going to play a big role in retirement income streams. And you do want to get strategic about when you decide to claim. Do you want to claim early at 62? Do you want to do at full retirement age of 67 or delay all the way up to 70? And make sure you coordinate with your spouse if you happen to be married. Now, at first glance, slow FIRE and traditional retirement might look the same, especially if both wrap up around the age of 60. But here's the difference. Slow FIRE is intentional. You're not just saving what's left over after you spend, you're planning ahead with purpose. You're aiming for financial independence before the default timeline. You're often doing it with more freedom, more flexibility, and more options to walk away earlier if you want to. Slow FIRE is about building wealth on your terms, not waiting for the system to tell you it's time. Flamingo FIRE is for people who say, I don't want to grind until I hit full FIRE. I just want enough saved that I can relax and let my money grow while I live a low-stress life. So this is where you aim to have 50% of your full FIRE number invested, and then you step into a state of semi-retirement. So let's say your full FIRE number is $1.5 million. Well, you would work and grind up until you had $750,000 invested. Then you would step back a little bit and enter where you do part-time work or consulting or passion-based income. Let's say a couple saves $800,000 by age 38, and then they move to Spain. They each freelance 10 to 15 hours a week while their portfolios remain untouched and grow to $1.5 million over the next 15 years. As far as a withdrawal strategy goes, there's no withdrawals in the early years of retirement. Remember, you're living on part-time income and leaving that portfolio untouched and giving it time to grow and letting compounding do its work. So by the time you do reach retirement, maybe you use a 4% withdrawal, maybe you use a 5% withdrawal, maybe you use a guardrails approach, just something that's more traditional of a typical retirement withdrawal. But during those early years, you're just living on your part-time income, not touching the portfolio. Now, the ideal mix of investment accounts to make this a successful retirement, number one, I'm going to say a traditional brokerage account. Yes, you should absolutely have a Roth or a traditional or a mixture of the two, because having that tax-free or tax-deferred growth is a great way to make your money grow over time, and you are aiming for a more traditional retirement age in this situation. But because you are entering that state of semi-retirement and only doing part-time work, I want you to still have a traditional brokerage account, because if something comes up, I still think you need to have a way to access funds. So make sure you have that traditional brokerage in your arsenal. Now, how Social Security will play a role really depends on how you approach Flamingo FIRE. You likely have strong earnings in the beginning of your career, and then if you step into more part-time role, you are likely going to have lesser Social Security than if you otherwise would have stayed into a full-time position. But you could still have Social Security play a substantial role in your retirement income once you reach full retirement age or whenever you decide to claim, because you're still paying into the system. That is, assuming you're working within the US and not retiring abroad, because if you do your part-time work abroad, that's not going to factor into Social Security. So your benefit could be reduced, it could be minimal, really depends on your situation. It's easy to confuse Flamingo FIRE, Barista FIRE, and Coast FIRE, because on the surface, they all involve some combination of early savings and perhaps part-time work or still full-time work. But the difference in timing, mindset, and money strategy are pretty major, so let's break it down. Barista FIRE is a bridge. You are not financially independent yet. You need to continue to work to supplement your income. Barista FIRE is a stepping stone, but your portfolio alone cannot fully support your lifestyle, so you are still reliant on work, whether it's part-time, consulting, or some other type. Flamingo FIRE is a glide. You've saved a big chunk, 50% of your full FIRE number, but you're not withdrawing from your portfolio. You're not fully retiring, you're stepping back and you're easing into a lower stress lifestyle. You're working part-time, you're still earning an income. The goal isn't to be fully retired. The goal is to ease up on stress and have a slower paced life. Coast FIRE is a cruise. With Coast FIRE, you already hit your FIRE trajectory, but now you're at cruising altitude, and your portfolio, importantly, still needs time to grow. You're still working full-time, but the burden is not on you that you have to contribute to your investments. You likely still do, but you don't have to, because without you adding another dime to your investments with the Coast FIRE strategy, you should be allowing compound interest to carry this portfolio to where you would be supported totally in your retirement. You would be financially free, but your portfolio needs decades to get there still. All three of these move you towards financial independence, but they do so in a different manner. Here's a snapshot of all 6 FIRE styles side by side. From Lean FIRE's minimalist path to Fat FIRE's high earnings, high spending lifestyle, you'll see how each one differs by age range, income, retirement spending, net worth targets, and how long it might take to achieve. For example, Lean FIRE is all about retiring fast and on a budget, while Flamingo FIRE is about saving a big chunk early, then coasting through flexible work. If you're in your 20s or your 30s, Coast FIRE might catch your eye. And that one's about saving hard early, then letting compounding take the wheel. And if you're more interested in balance over speed, Slow FIRE might be your path. So is there a FIRE path that fits your lifestyle? Are you all in on Lean FIRE and you want to save a set amount and then geo arbitrage and live in a lower cost of living area? Do you not want to give up the luxuries of your life and you want to aim for Fat FIRE and have more options? Or do you like the creative strategy of Barista FIRE or Flamingo FIRE? Or are you ready for slow and steady and Slow FIRE? Let me know your thoughts in a comment down below. I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this one, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. Or if you know of someone who might get something out of this type of content, please consider sharing. I'll see you soon. Bye. When it comes to how much you can withdraw from your portfolio in retirement, a lot of times we give credit to 4%. Now, they tend to be a little bit more conservative and use a withdrawal rate similar now early as possible, maybe in your late 20s or your 30s. Theoretically, the higher your income, the easier it should be to, oh my goodness, I'm all over the place.